everyone, and welcome to Rima Reads. I don't know what this was. So I am starting a YouTube channel and I don't know what I'm doing, but I'm going to talk about the books that I read this month. I read 5 books this month. I had some thoughts on them and so decided to make a YouTube channel. So the first book I read this month is The Darklord of Derklord by Diana Wynne Jones. Read it on Kindle. Essentially, the summary of the book is there is this magical world, typical fantasy world with, wizards and soldiers and dragons and elves, and very fantasy. And once a year, businessman named Mr. Chensi holds a pilgrimage and he transports people from our world, I'm pretty sure it's supposed to be our world, to magical world and gives tours. And the entire world is supposed to be pulled into these tours, so they have to play parts. Someone's always chosen to be the Dark Lord. There's always an evil seductress witch and fighting soldiers and things like that. So really, really cool concept. The true villain of the story is capitalism, so that's always fun. Essentially, the writer is the one who wrote Howl's Moving Castle. Love Howl's Moving Castle, so I was very excited to read this book. I did end up giving it 3 stars. Part of the reason behind that was I wasn't super attached to any of the characters. I liked them all enough. So the main character, I forgot his name already. The main character's name is Dirk, and he's fumbling, bumbling wizard who likes to do fun experiments and creates his own children griffins. So they're griffins he made, but they're part of his family. There's 5 of them, plus his own son is selected to be a wizard tour guide for a group of the pilgrims. His wife is chosen to be the evil seductress witch person. And essentially there's this whole background plot where everyone's trying to stop Mr. Chansey's pilgrimages. We do not like. The reason I gave it 3 stars is because I couldn't really tell if this was supposed to be a middle grade book or an adult book, and it was some sort of weird mish of both that I did not like. Writing style wise, it was very middle grade, fun and easy to read, lots of funny jokes, but the actual story gets really dark at some points. Lots of violence. I wasn't the biggest fan of that. And then I also wasn't super attached to any character either. And for me to be attached to a character, to a book. So I didn't find myself super attached to any of them. I was sort of just reading to learn more about the world and what's up with these pilgrimages. How did this all happen? And things like that. So I think the most interesting part is just learning about how these tours take place, all of the seeing all of the intricate setup that goes into planning an entire pilgrimage for the world. I thought that was really cool. So overall I liked it, but I didn't love it, hence 3 stars. The next book I read was Middle Grade by Shanann McGuire. These 2 siblings who are created in this alchemist experiment. So there's Roger, he's the sibling that's skilled with words and languages and just understands how people work and how the world works, things like that. And then there's Dodger, yes, Roger and Dodger. Dodger, who is his twin, and she's a numbers person. So everything math, she knows, she's got it good. And they were created by this evil alchemist guy to hold something called the Doctrine. Is that what it's called? The Doctrine. So he's trying to put this doctrine of ethos into them and then they will be able to like gain all this power and find the impossible city, and then he can attain to godhood. So he like creates these two little people, these twins. Apparently the doctrine can't be held by one person, and he decides to separate them because if they know about each other too early, it can manifest the doctrine all wrong. In general, again, I thought it was such a cool concept. Very, very interesting. I really liked how the story was written. McGuire's writing style was really, really fun. I really liked those little tidbits that she put in parentheses throughout the book. And I liked the stories that she had in there. So she had like Wizard of Oz type stories between every chapter that related to the overall plot. That was really cool. And overall, I thought it was interesting, but it was just so long. It was like 500 pages, and it did not need to be. We literally start with Roger and Dodger from like they were born till all the way to their 30s or 40s. I don't remember how old they ended at the end, but they were like old, and we follow their life throughout the entire thing. There are lots of scenes where like nothing happens except them talking to each other. Lots of time jumps in between their various ages. I feel like it could have been condensed a lot and make for a much sharper, concise story. And then the other thing that I didn't particularly like about this book was the villain. So the villain is James Reed, and he's like this alchemist. He was created by some other really prominent alchemist woman, whose name I can't remember, and she like created him Frankenstein style, basically imparted all of her teachings onto him, and then he murdered her and then did all this doctrine stuff. None of that's spoilers, by the way. I felt like it could have been really cool, but we really didn't get too much out of the villain. There was a lot of chapters of him just doing villainous stuff and being evil without more information on why exactly he's feeling this way. Like, I still don't really get why he killed his mentor. I felt like that was very vague, was not a fan of him or the other villain lady. But overall, the story was such a cool concept. So I also gave this 3 stars because I liked it, but did not love it. So the next book I read was The Adventure Zone, Petals to the Metal. Okay, so Taz, The Adventure Zone, is my favorite podcast ever. If you don't know what The Adventure Zone is, it is a Dungeons and Dragons podcast hosted by this guy, Griffin McElroy. The players are his family members. So his eldest brother, Justin McElroy, plays Taco, elf wizard. Travis McElroy plays Magnus, who's a human fighter. And then their dad plays Merle, who is a dwarven cleric, and it's literally the best thing I've ever heard in my life. My favorite podcast of all time. Is hilarious. It's so funny, but it also will make you cry because it's just so beautiful. And that ended a few years ago, and since then they've been releasing graphic novels about the various arcs in the Adventure Zone to follow the entire story. So this is the 3rd arc, Petals to the Metal. The first one is Here There'll Be Gerblins, and the second one is Murder on the Rockport Limited. Both of which are amazing. So, spoilers ahead now. I really loved the adaptation of the Petals to Metal arc to this graphic novel. I've loved all of the adaptations so far. Petals to Metal in general, I really, really, really love the first half of the podcast arc, but the second half, once they get into racing, is really hard for me to follow because I'm just not very, like, a visual race person. Like, it was very hard for me to visualize what Griffin was saying during the races, so I really appreciated Carrie Peach, who did the artwork for this novel, because she did an amazing job illustrating out the race sequence made it much easier for me to follow. And overall, her artistic choices are amazing. Things that I really, really loved. Merle seducing some plants. Always love Merle seducing some plants. It's a bit funnier in the podcast because the boys are just horrified that their dad is seducing plants, but in the comic it's still great, and it's so much fun to see it drawn out how ridiculous it is. And then I love the art that they picked for Sloane and Hurley. They're both so beautiful. Beautiful, and in love. So yes. Look at how cute Sloane and Hurley are. Oh, beautiful. Yeah, we love them. Petals to the Metal is really where things start picking up in terms of peppering in the backstory and, like, you know, the things that are happening outside of the Bureau of Balance, and learning more about, you know, like what's actually going on. You get to see the red robes, barreled blue jeans, red robes, and you get little pepper in facts about Lucretia as well, which are great. And I also just really love what they added to Petals to the Metal. So like I mentioned in the podcast, as it is a collaborative effort and they don't necessarily know where the story is going to go for in the future, you can't really foreshadow, and then also you can't really show what the NPCs are doing or saying without spoiling it for your, you know, siblings who are playing the game. So yeah, you can't really show what the NPCs are doing very often, or their internal thought process, which you can't do in a novel. So there's a lot of things that they added to foreshadow what's going to happen in the future. Yeah, I really appreciated that they really brought home the fact that this was Merle's relic that he created. You don't really get that in the podcast. Anyways, other favorite scene, look at that. It's so beautifully drawn. I love this. Literally 2 pages later, you get Merle saying this amazing line that says, "I don't need your help to fuck an onion," right after that beautiful heart-wrenching scene of Sloane and Hurley turning into a tree together. So you can see the balance of comedy and heartwarming moments that they really got down in this. And then what they added with Merle's words about, "I can't comprehend," let me read it out loud. "I can't comprehend the kind of heartless bastard who could let something like that sash out into the world." Merle, sweetie. Damn, that foreshadowing. Boy. And I love Lucretia's response to it and the entire ending art panel. It's beautiful. She talks about, like, for each injustice an act of kindness, for every wound a remedy. No person is inherently evil, Merle, nor are they inherently good. Villains can choose to be merciful, heroes can choose to be vindictive. Our choice is to find who we are, but of equal importance is what we believe. And I believe for every person you meet who would do you harm, there is a person who would lend you aid on your darkest day. And they show Barry and Loop. Like, how do you do this to me? Okay. I sometimes cry because of these guys. Anyways, look at that foreshadowing. I love this book so much. I love this podcast so much. Highly recommend. Please go read. Anyways, I just wanted to squeal about this a lot, so maybe I'm gonna go listen to the entire podcast again. Whew. Okay, get that out of my system. I still have 2 more books to review. Oh god, this is turning out to be a long first video. Hopefully you guys haven't stopped yet. So the next book I read this past month was A Curse So Dark and Lonely by Brigid Kemmerer, I think. Anyways, A Curse So Dark and Lonely, and it's a Beauty and the Beast retelling. So you have this prince, Prince Ren, who was cursed by an evil witch to repeat his 18th year forever until a girl would fall for him, and he turns into an evil beast halfway through like the cycle that he has for girls to fall in love with him. So I think he has like 3 months to basically make a girl fall in love with him, and halfway through that he like turns into a beast, and then the cycle repeats. He has a new girl to fall in love with, and the main girl is named Harper, and she is from our world, like our human people world, not magical world, where this curse is taking place. And essentially she sees this girl being kidnapped and is like, hells no, and tries to save her. You know, she got that woman code down. So she tries to save her and then accidentally gets transported into a magical world, and you learn that Gray, who's the captain of Prince Ren's guard, was kidnapping the girl to come to this magical world and try and fall in love with the prince. And they've been doing that for hundreds of years, some long amount of time. I don't know if it was actually hundreds of years. It might have just been hundreds of cycles, because I think the kingdom would notice if the king was gone for 100 years. So maybe like 5 years, but 100 girls. I don't know. Unclear the timeline. So Harper, the main character, has cerebral palsy, and I think she's great representation. You often don't see a character with disabilities be the main character of a fantasy romance novel, and that was really great. Her disability doesn't define her throughout the series, but it's mentioned, and it explains certain things throughout the book and her life, like how she wasn't allowed to do too much because people like her brother thought she was weak due to her disabilities. And then you see the growth throughout the book on her gaining independence and actually finally getting to do what she, finally getting to be on her own and do what she wants, and shows that she does actually have strength. So I really, really liked that arc for Harper. I thought she was a great main character, and she was also like pretty smart. She very quickly early on figured out he was under a curse and like needed her to fall in love with him. Good for her using her head. I really liked her. Her arc was great. There was a bit at the beginning of the hashtag I'm not like other girls thing going on with Harper, not necessarily from her, but from Ren and Gray. And at first I was really annoyed by it. And actually I'm still kind of annoyed by it because Harper is great and mentions multiple times how Harper is not like others because she's like fighting them because she was kidnapped, fighting them and trying to escape the tower and like things like that, and other girls didn't do that. And I was like, well, that sounds shady and wrong. And then you realize that the reason why no other girls have escaped or like done anything like Harper is because Gray particularly picks conventionally attractive, aka hot women who will not be missed by their families. So like they're like chill with coming to a magical fantasy world. And he's done this like hundreds of times, and it's never broken the cycle, and never once during those hundreds of times he thought to maybe, not find a conventionally attractive woman, or, find a man. Like literally you have hundreds of cycles. Come on, think outside of the box, Gray. So the not like other girls thing technically wasn't Harper's fault. It was Ren and Gray for only picking a very specific type of woman to bring into their magical fantasy curse. So I let Harper slide, but I did not let Ren and Gray slide because y'all dumb. you probably could have fixed the curse earlier if you, you know, varied your options in your pool. You know, you gotta try different things once in a while. Anyways, going off of that rant, Ren as a character, is okay. I liked him. I thought he's like the type of character that calculates ahead 15 steps and, you know, very manipulative. And I think they made a good reasoning on why he hasn't fallen in love in the last, you know, 100 cycles or whatever. Because it is a very valid point that if your goal is to fall in love to end this curse, you're not focusing on falling in love and finding the person that fits for you. You're, you know, focusing on ending a curse. And so he never really truly opened up to people before Harper. I think they did a good job explaining why he didn't fall in love and then showing him and Harper's relationship. I thought it was well developed. Like, it was a good enemies to lovers relationship, but it wasn't exactly lovers. Like, they spent a lot of time getting to know each other. And again, there was always that underlying tension of like, is this real or is it because there's a curse and we both want it broken, so we're trying to fall in love, which I thought was very interesting. I'll say some spoilers. I really like, so skip ahead to this time, but I really like how the ending, they didn't necessarily fall in love. Essentially, the reason the curse was broken was because Lilith was killed, and neither of them knew, is it because we were also in love, or is it something like, essentially they needed more time to determine whether they were actually in love or not. And I was like, that's some good shit. I like that. Like, you don't know a person for 3 months and then be like, yes, love enough to break a curse. Maybe you do. I don't know. That's not my life. So I really liked their relationship. I thought it was very well done for a fairy tale retelling, particularly a Beauty and Beast retelling. And then my favorite character, Gray. I love Gray. He is Prince Ren's captain of the guard, except there are no other guard people, so he's like the only guard there. He's been with Ren throughout the all of the cycles. He like kidnaps the girls for him, and he's like stoic, badass bodyguard who, you know, murders people and things and will do whatever Ren says, but he's also got a heart of gold, and I love that type of character so much. I have some thoughts. One, I don't know whether I like Harper and Gray or not. They definitely had a more interesting relationship, in my opinion, versus Ren and Harper. It didn't necessarily have to be romantic, but they kind of hinted at it, and since they hinted at it, I'm like, wait, actually, I want that romance then. If they like just kept it platonic and had this awesome relationship, I would have loved that, because you know I always love platonic male-female friendships in my life. But then they hinted at romance, and I'm like, this relationship is so cool, so awesome. I want it. Give it to me. So I do really like Harper and Gray. I wonder how they're gonna go in the next book, because I like Gray better than Ren. So I think overall the book was really good. I didn't give it 5 stars. I gave it 4 stars because I really liked it, but it wasn't perfect. Like, the storyline is super straightforward. Like, it is a Beauty and the Beast retelling. There are no twists or anything like that. It's fairly straightforward. I do think she does a lot of good things, like the relationship building, the character building are great, but the actual storyline itself is very straightforward. Also, Lilith as a villain was, again, real boring. She was just generic, being evil and then leaving and then coming back and being evil. So those things left me with a 4-star rating instead of 5, but it was still really good. I liked it. It could have been better, but it wasn't. And then the last book I read is the Foxhole Court series by Nora Sakovic. A lot of people really love this series, and a lot of people really hate this series, and there's kind of no in between. particularly fans of some of my favorite books, The Raven Boys and Six of Crows. Love, love, love the Foxhole Court. So considering, you know, people who love my favorite books love this book, I decided to give it a chance. And I don't know how I feel about it. It's weird. It's not just me who thinks it's weird, right? It's like a weird book. So the main character is Neil, and he's like the son of the butcher, who's this like evil gang boss, and him and his mom was on the run from like the folks under his father's gang for years, and then his mom died and he had to like burn her up in a car, and he lived on his own and was like playing this made up lacrosse game. It's like lacrosse but more violent. Lacrosse is pretty violent already. Playing this fantasy game, and he got into this game because of in his childhood friend Kevin was super into this game. He's like the biggest name out there in collegiate sports for XC, the lacrosse game. And they were childhood friends, and then Neil's dad got brutally murdered in front of Kevin and his brother and Neil. But Kevin stayed where he was and became one of the most famous Etsy players with his twin brother Rico. And so Neil's playing it at his high school, but he's on the run, and he's like, after high school I'm gonna dip and maybe leave the country, maybe do some other things, who knows. But then he gets scouted by whatever this school is called. What's this school called? PSU? Either way, they're foxes. It's called the Foxhole Court for a reason. So he gets recruited by the Foxes to play Etsy at the collegiate level. Kevin is on this team because he had some beef with his brother. Essentially, his brother was super abusive and like pissed off that Kevin was better than him in this magical game and broke his hand. And so Kevin moved to this school and is learning to play right-handed instead of left-handed. So he's not as good anymore, and he recruits Neil. So that's like the beginning of the story. A lot of this book is exposition, honestly. And I don't know how I feel about it. It's very unrealistic and maybe slightly racist because the Yakuza are like the main bad guys in this series. I'm like, why does the Yakuza care so much about this sport? I do not understand. But yeah, it's a little problematic. Neil is sexually assaulted by one of the people on his team, but it's like all brushed over and no one cares about that except for maybe Neil, but really no one else. Like people die. There's just a lot in this book that's like problematic but glossed over. I'm fine with problematic stuff in books if it's addressed as like, hey, this thing was problematic, or the narrative itself explains like, these are bad things, like not good, don't do. This book doesn't really do that. It kind of is like, here are things that happened, okay, and other things that happened. So I didn't like that portion of the book. This book also just like, there's not too much plot. It's mostly him bonding with his very dysfunctional team. They don't really like each other at this point. I think in the later books there's more #found family, and I love found family. But in this one, they're all kind of like a hot mess. Like, I'm going to continue reading this series because I really want to know what the hype is about. Right now, this is a solid, like, middle of the ground, maybe 3 stars, maybe 2, unclear. I also really want to know who Neil is going to end up with, because I 100% thought for sure it was going to be his childhood friend Kevin, who he's going to this school with to learn Etsy. I don't even know. But Kevin has this like bodyguard / maybe lover, Andrew. And they're like, I don't really know what their deal is. I think that Andrew and Neil might end up together. They had significantly more bonding in this book. They spent a lot of time together, and their relationship was the most developed in this book. They essentially go from not liking each other to having an understanding. So I'm like, are they going to end up together? So I think I'm really going to read this book to finish this book series to see which character Neil ends up with. Yeah, that's mostly the main reason I'll continue, and also to understand what the hype is about. I really don't know, guys. I don't, like, explain to me. I don't know. Like, will I like? Will I not like? I don't know. So anyways, overall this book is kind of a hot mess, like me. So maybe I'll really like it, because I'm a hot mess. But maybe I won't. We'll see. That was my July books I read. Overall, they were all like pretty solid middle books, except for the Adventure Zone, which we all know I love and will die for. But yeah, those are the books I read this month. And I don't know how to end YouTube videos because this is my first one. Hopefully you guys liked it. I'm planning on doing a lot more because I really like reading books. Anyways, bye!